beta plus the book value of common share equity to the market value. So book over market. Company size increases, risk goes down. So accounting information may be useful as using riskiness. So they're finding you take the book over the market of the equity, and that is a good measure of riskiness combined with. And you can read this. One part in the text talks about how beta, we assume it's stationary, but it's more useful if it can change. Now, that makes sense. Now, generally, a company's overall risk can change minutely from day to day, minute to minute. Maybe month to month, 6 months to 6 months. Yes, it can happen with a company. A change in CEO increases the riskiness for a period of time because you don't know if it's a better CEO or a worse one, right? When Apple had Tim Cook, who knows which way it was going to go. Then it settles down into something. But that makes total sense. Generally, beta is thought to be stationary, unchanging. More realistic is to have it moving. Market of the equity. Questions? Okay, oh, sorry, did you guys still need that? Okay. So we just gave a whole bunch of reasons why the market isn't as efficient as we thought, but it doesn't mean it's not efficient enough. These anomalies, the market is still efficient. So it responds to news fairly quickly. Now, market values may not always be available, or don't want to say accurate, or useful. If there's a departure from ideal conditions, for example, the bounded rationality of investors, so thin markets means the value of money going through and stock equity is lower. So think of a used car market, okay? And just think of one in Edmonton versus one that's across Canada, okay? Which market can more accurately reflect the worth of whatever the used car is? It is. Well, ideally, you'd like to be able to look at a whole bunch of the same model, kilometers on it, compare the trim levels, all that kind of thing. Look at the wear and tear on it through the pictures. and then come to a price conclusion, right? Well, in Edmonton, you might only have one or two of the models for sale at that time. Whereas a bigger market, you've got more variety in it, and sheer number of vehicles is much larger. Gauge a price better. Okay. Same with stock market. Okay. If we look at a small stock market, let's say a small country. A lot of smaller countries have their own stock markets. I mean, even smaller than ours. Compare that to the New York Stock Exchange. Which do you think is going to give you a more effective, efficient, big ones, right? So thin means you're missing bulk. You don't have as many stocks. You don't have as much capital going through at any time. That kind of thing. Does that make sense? Yeah? Okay. And of course, rapid changes in technology, computer trading is huge. Well, getting huger. So that's where companies will pay lots of money to have their computers as close to New York Stock Exchange as they can, because those milliseconds or microseconds of data transfer, they need to be as gold. And what they'll do is if the price goes up in the algorithm, let's say by 1 cent or 2 cents, it'll buy. If it goes down, it'll sell. So they aren't actually even looking at financial statements. Now, the algorithms that they build are built by mathematicians. So they build in probabilities and all kinds of things like that, and I don't know how to do that, so I'm not 100% sure what's all in there. We're part of the problem in 2007, 2008, because precisely that, no one knew what was in it, and so they were just relying on them going, yep, we should buy this, yep, we should sell this. But Wired magazine had a really good article on that a few years ago. And if any of you are interested, I can look it up for you. Okay, so still the markets are pretty... So, conclusions then. Investors aren't always rational and need help interpreting financial statements. Because of that, there's anomalies and market inefficiency. But if we as accountants can give them better predictive information, like fair values, should reduce inefficiencies. So we should give them predictive information. And more relevant, it has to be reliable. Financial information will help. And accounting information can help predict future firm value and riskiness. So measurement perspective wins. Oops. Okay. Questions? Okay, Olson's Clean Surplus. You can just read that. Don't worry about the sections. It's all math stuff that I don't need you to know. Measurement perspective, IFRS already has fair value. We talked about AR already in AP. Bond discounts and premiums, right? Finance leases and HUNs. Revaluation of PPE. And it goes on the next page. Lower of cost and market rule. Ceiling test for capital assets, where if the fair value is below the book value, you lower the book value down, right? You write it down. Write down if book value. You did a whole bunch of that of impairment in 315, so that's the impairment. And again, you guys, you don't have to remember how to do this, just kind of understand the concept. So, Push down accounting when a firm buys another. We revalue the assets. Impaired loans, financial instruments are fair value. Research and development, fair value. Goodwill, fair value. Pretty much any time we have impairment, it's fair value. Okay. One thing I do want to say, though, is lower of cost and market, because you don't, inventory goes higher. Ceiling tests, again, sometimes you can write it up, sometimes you can't. But these kinds of things where you write down but not write up are one-sided fair value. They're more conservative. Okay. So remember, an audit opinion provides no information on company value, right? It doesn't even say all the transactions are correct, because of course you just test a sample, right? So the company can fail even though they have a clean opinion in the audit, even if there's no fraud involved. So courts are now accounting rules to the intent. Harder to prove, but necessary, especially with IFRS, because IFRS requires so much more judgment. Okay? More value information would be useful for auditors, but the minute we start putting in relevant information that's fair value, it's based. So when the auditor looks at it, they have, is that a decent estimate? So in a sense, it gives them more potential liability. So more judgment could lead to in reviewing estimates. Lead to greater conservatism, a one-sided approach. Going lower is better. Auditors are faced with being sued, ultimately, especially in the US, right? So err on the side of caution, keep investors' expectations lower, and then the bad news, right? That's kind of the thinking. Okay, so conclusion on the measurement perspective. Decision makers need more value-oriented information from accountants. So present value, current value, market value, that kind of stuff. We already do a mixed measurement approach with IFRS, increasing current value. And we'll give extra disclosure, which will help reduce auditor liability. Okay, so end of chapter questions are here. Yeah, and if you go through these, you guys, and you have any questions, let me know. Was that speed okay? Too slow, too fast? Anything? Okay, so you all thought it was perfect. That's how I'm going to read it, okay? Okay. So that's it, you guys. We'll do chapter 8. And yeah, have a good week, you guys.